The Adventure of the Stockbroker's Clerk. Shortly after my marriage, I purchased a medical practice in Paddington from a Dr. Farquhar. The old doctor had once enjoyed a vast circle of patients, but his health had failed. He suffered from a condition akin to St. Vitus's dance, and his advancing years had caused the practice to decline significantly. People, quite understandably, prefer to be treated by a man who is himself in good health, and they place little trust in the medical wisdom of one who cannot heal himself. As my predecessor's health withered, so did his business. By the time I acquired the practice, its annual income had dropped from £1,200 to little more than £300. However, I relied on my youth and energy, and I felt confident that within a year or two, my consulting room would be crowded once more. During the first 3 months of my life in Paddington, I was kept so busy that I saw nothing of my friend, Mr. Sherlock Holmes. I had no time to visit him at Baker Street, and he himself rarely ventured out unless on professional business. I was, therefore, delighted when one June morning, while reading the British Medical Journal after breakfast, I heard the ring of the bell followed by the sharp, familiar voice of my old friend. "Ah, my dear Watson," he said, stepping into the room. "I'm glad to see you. I trust Mrs. Watson has quite recovered from the trials we endured during the affair of the Sign of Four." "Thank you. She is feeling excellent," I replied, shaking his hand warmly. "I hope also," Sherlock Holmes continued, seating himself in a rocking chair, "that your medical duties have not entirely extinguished your interest in our little mysteries." "On the contrary," I cried. "Only last night I was looking through my old notes, and I even reread a few of them." "Then I presume you do not consider your collection complete?" "Certainly not. I should dearly like to add to it. Say today, even if it means a journey to Birmingham. Anywhere you wish. And your practice? What of it? I shall ask my neighbor to see my patients. I always return the favor when he goes away." "Splendid," said Sherlock Holmes, leaning back and fixing me with a piercing gaze from under his drooping eyelids. "Uh-huh. I see you've been ill. A summer cold is a most disagreeable thing. You are right. I had a severe chill last week and was confined to the house for 3 days. But I thought I had cast off every trace of the illness by now." "Indeed, you look quite robust. Then how did you deduce that I was unwell?" "My dear Watson, you know my methods." "The method of logical deduction?" "Precisely. And where did you begin?" "With your slippers." I looked down at the new leather slippers on my feet. "But how could these slippers—" I began, but Holmes answered before I could finish. "Your slippers are new," he explained. "You have worn them for no more than 2 weeks, yet the soles, which you are now exposing, are already scorched. At first, I thought you had soaked them and then burnt them while drying. But then I noticed the paper shop labels still attached to the heels. Water would surely have washed them away. It follows, then, that you have been sitting by the fire with your feet stretched towards a grate, an action unlikely for a healthy man to take, even in a summer as damp and cold as this one." As always, once Sherlock Holmes provided the explanation, it all seemed perfectly simple. Holmes, reading the thought upon my face, gave a wry smile. "I fear that my explanations only do me harm," he remarked. "Effects without causes often make a far greater impression on the imagination. Well, are you ready to join me for Birmingham?" "Of course. But what is the case?" "You shall hear everything on the way. A carriage and a client are waiting below. Let us go." "One moment." I scribbled a note to my neighbor, ran upstairs to inform my wife of my departure, and caught up with Holmes on the doorstep. "Is your neighbor a doctor too?" he asked, nodding towards the brass plate on the next door. Yes, he bought his practice at the same time I bought mine. An old established one, as old as mine. Both were started when these houses were built. You have bought the better one. I have. But how did you know? By the steps, my dear Watson. Your steps are worn much deeper by the soles of your visitors. Each one is nearly 3 inches lower than your neighbor's. But here's our client, Mr. Hall Pycroft. Allow me to introduce my friend, Dr. Watson, said Holmes. Now then, cabby, give the horses the whip. We have a train to catch. I took my seat opposite Pycroft. He was a tall, well-built young man with an open, honest face and light, curled mustaches. He wore a glossy top hat and a neat black suit, which gave him the air of a dapper city clerk, which in fact he was. He belonged to that class known as cockneys, who provide the country with its finest volunteer soldiers and most excellent athletes. His round, ruddy face was naturally cheerful, but now the corners of his mouth were turned down, giving him a slightly comical appearance. What trouble had brought him to Sherlock Holmes? I did not learn until we were settled in a first-class carriage and the train had begun to move. Now, said Holmes, we have more than an hour of leisure ahead of us. Mr. Pycroft, pray tell my friend the story of your adventure exactly as you told it to me, or even more fully, if possible. It will be useful for me to trace the sequence of events once more. The matter, Watson, may prove to be a trifle, but it contains certain interesting points which you, like myself, so dearly love. Now, Mr. Pycroft, pray begin. I shall not interrupt you again. Now, I come to the most remarkable part of my story. I should tell you that I lodge out near Hampstead, at number 17 Potter's Terrace. On the very evening that this pleasant letter arrived, I was sitting at home, smoking my pipe. Suddenly, my landlady entered and handed me a business card, on which was printed, Arthur Pinner, financial agent. I had never heard the name before and could not imagine what he wanted with me, but I asked the landlady to show him up. A middle-sized, dark-eyed man entered, a brunette with a black beard and a somewhat shiny nose. His step was brisk, and his speech was clipped, like a man accustomed to valuing his time. "Mr. Hall Pycroft, I believe?" he asked. "Yes, sir," I replied, offering him a chair. "Formerly with Coxon's?" "Yes, sir." "And now engaged by the banking house of Mawson and Williams?" "Quite so." "Well," said he, "the fact is, I have heard that you possess exceptional business abilities. Parker, the former manager at Coxon's, spoke very highly of you. I was, naturally, quite flattered to hear such a glowing report. I had always done my duty at Coxon's, but it had never occurred to me that I was being talked about in the city in such a fashion. Have you a good memory?" Pinner asked next. "Fairly good," I replied modestly. "Have you kept pace with the market lately?" "Indeed I have. I read the stock exchange list every morning." "What admirable diligence!" he cried. "That is the very source of all success. If you don't mind, I shall test you a little. Tell me, what is the price of Ayrshires?" 105 to 105 and a quarter. "And United New Zealand?" 104. "Good. And Broken Hill British?" 107 to 107 and a half. "Splendid," he shouted. "Simply wonderful. You are exactly as I imagined you would be. My boy, you were made for better things than to be a mere clerk at Mawson's." His enthusiasm, as you can imagine, rather startled me. "That may be so, Mr. Pinner," I said, "but not everyone holds me in such high regard. It took me a good deal of running about to find this vacancy, and I am very glad to have it." "Oh, heavens, what are you saying? Do you belong in a place like that? Now, listen what I have to tell you. It's true I cannot offer you the position you deserve right this moment, but compared to Mawson's, It is like night and day. When do you start at Mawson's? On Monday. I'd be willing to bet that you won't go there. What? Not go to Mawson's? Exactly, my dear fellow. By that time, you'll be the business manager of the Franca Midland Hardware Company, which has 134 branches in various towns and villages across France, not to mention Brussels and San Remo. The news quite took my breath away. But I have never heard of this company, I stammered. Very likely not. We do not shout our name from every street corner. The firm's capital is entirely private, and business is so good that we simply have no need for advertising. The managing director of the firm is my brother, Harry Pinner, who founded it. Knowing that I was coming to London, he asked me to look for a smart assistant, a young man of ability and business sense, with good references. Parker told me about you, and so here I am. To begin with, we can offer you a mere £500 a year, but in the future, £500! I cried, utterly amazed. That is just for a start. Furthermore, you will receive a 1% commission on every new contract, and you may take my word for it, your salary will double. But I know nothing of hardware. But you know everything of accountancy. My head was swimming, and I could hardly keep my seat. But suddenly, a spark of doubt entered my mind. I shall be frank with you, sir, I said. Mawson's have offered me £200 a year, but Mawson and Williams is a firm of high standing. As for yours, I know absolutely nothing. You are a treasure, my guest cried in delight. That is exactly the kind of man we need. You are not easily fooled, and that is very good indeed. Here are £100, and if you consider the matter settled, put them in your pocket as an advance. That is a very large sum, I said. When should I begin my duties? Go to Birmingham tomorrow morning, he replied. And at 1 o'clock, come to the firm's temporary office at 126 Corporation Street. I shall give you a letter from my brother. He must give his formal consent, but between us, I consider your appointment a certainty. I do not know how to thank you, Mr. Pinner, I said. It is nothing, my boy. You have only yourself to thank. Now just 1 or 2 points, a mere formality, but necessary to settle. Have you some paper? Be so kind as to write. I agree to accept the position of business manager for the Franca Midland Hardware Company at an annual salary of £500. I wrote down what Mr. Pinner dictated, and he placed the paper in his pocket. And one more question, said he. What do you intend to do about Mawson's? In my excitement, I had entirely forgotten them. I shall write and decline the post, I answered. In my opinion, you should not do that. I was at Mawson's and had a row with the manager about you. I went there to make inquiries, and he began to shout that I was enticing his staff away. At last, I lost my temper. If you want to keep good men, pay them properly, I told him. He replied that you would rather serve them on a small salary than us on a large one. I'll bet you £5, said I, that when I offer him our managership, he won't even write to you to decline your post. Done, he cried. We practically save him from the gutter, and he will not fail us. Those were his exact words. What an insolent fellow! I exclaimed. I have never even seen him, yet he dares to say such things of me. I shall not write to them now, no matter how much you entreat me. Splendid. Then it is a bargain, he said, rising from his chair. I am glad to have found my brother such a fine assistant. Here is your £100, and here is the letter. Remember the address, 126 Corporation Street. Do not forget, tomorrow at 1. Good night, and may you have the success you so richly deserve. That, as far as I can remember, was our conversation. You can imagine, Dr. Watson, how delighted I was by this offer. I did not sleep until midnight, thrilled by such a brilliant prospect, and the next day I left for Birmingham by the earliest train. Upon arrival, I left my luggage at the hotel on New Street and set out on foot for the given address. There were about 15 minutes left until the appointed time, but I thought it would do no harm if I arrived early. Number 126 proved to be a large passage, at the end of which were two big shops. Behind one of them was a winding staircase leading to the offices of various local firms. At the bottom of the stairs hung a large directory board, but no matter how I searched, the name Franca Midland was not there. My heart sank, and I stood for a few minutes before the board, staring at it blankly and asking myself who would play such a cruel joke on me. Just then, a stranger approached me. He was the exact image of my visitor from the previous night, except that he was clean-shaven and his hair was slightly lighter. "Mr. Pycroft?" he asked. "Yes," I replied. "I was expecting you, but you're a little early. I received a letter from my brother this morning. He speaks very highly of you. I was looking for my new firm on the directory when you arrived. We have no sign up yet, for we only took the rooms last week. Come upstairs, and we shall talk." We climbed the stairs almost to the very roof and found ourselves in a small, dirty room, bare and shabby, with a door leading to another just like it. Expecting to see a grand office with rows of polished desks and a crowd of clerks, I stared in bewilderment at a bare window without curtains, two pine stools, and a small table, which, along with an abacus and a wastepaper basket, made up the entire furniture. "Mr. Pycroft, pray do not let our humble quarters discourage you," my new employer said, noticing my long face. "Rome was not built in a day. Our firm is wealthy enough, but we do not believe in throwing money to the wind. Please take a seat and give me your letter." I handed him the letter, which he read with great care. "Oh, you have certainly made a strong impression on my brother Arthur," he remarked. "And my brother is a discerning man. Mind you, he judges people by the London standard, whereas I use my own Birmingham measure. But this time, I shall follow his advice. Consider yourself engaged by this office as of today." "What will my duties be?" I asked. "In time, you will manage a large branch of our company in Paris, which serves 134 locations across France, distributing English ceramics throughout the country. The final trade orders are being processed in the coming days. For now, you will remain in Birmingham and attend to your business here." "What business exactly?" I inquired. Instead of an answer, he pulled a large, red-bound volume from a desk drawer. "This is a directory of the city of Paris," he said, listing the occupations of its inhabitants. "Take it home and compile a list of all the hardware dealers along with their addresses. It is of the utmost importance to us. But surely there are specialized trade directories for such a purpose?" I suggested. "They are quite unreliable. The French system differs from our own. In short, take this directory and bring me the completed list by 12 o'clock next Monday." "Good day, Mr. Pycroft. I am sure you will find our firm to your liking, provided, of course, that you remain diligent and sharp-witted." With the book in my hands, I returned to my hotel, my mind filled with conflicting emotions. On one hand, I was officially employed, and I had £100 in my pocket. On the other, the shabby state of the office, the lack of a sign on the wall, and other trifles that would strike anyone experienced in banking made me ponder the financial standing of my new masters. But come what may, I had received the advance, and it was time to get to work. I toiled away all through Sunday, yet by Monday I had only reached the letter H. I went to see my new chief and found him in the same dilapidated room. He told me to continue copying out the Parisian tinsmiths and return with the work on Wednesday. But even by Wednesday, the task was unfinished. I slaved over that list until Friday, that is, until yesterday. Yesterday, I finally delivered the completed list to Pinner. "Thank you," he said. "I fear I underestimated the difficulty of the task. This list will be most useful to me." "Yes, it took a fair amount of elbow grease," I remarked. "And now," he declared, "I must ask you to compile a list of furniture stores. They also deal in ceramics." "Very well. Come to the office tomorrow at 7 in the evening, so that I may see how you are progressing. But do not overwork yourself. Go to a music hall tonight. I think a bit of recreation will do neither you nor your work any harm." As he said this, he laughed, and to my horror, I suddenly noticed a poorly set gold filling in his second lower tooth on the left side. Sherlock Holmes actually rubbed his hands together with delight, while I listened to our client in utter bewilderment. "Your confusion is understandable, Dr. Watson," said Pycroft. "You simply do not know all the circumstances. Remember the man I spoke with in London, my master's brother? Well, he had the exact same gold filling in his mouth. I noticed it when he laughed while telling me of his conversation with the manager at Mawson's. I then mentally compared the two brothers and saw that their voices and figures were identical, and they differed only in details that could easily be altered with a razor or a wig. There was no doubt the man standing before me was the very same man who had visited me in London. Of course, two brothers might be as alike as two peas in a pod, but for them to have the same tooth filled in exactly the same way, that was an impossibility. My chief dismissed me with a bow, and I found myself in the street, hardly knowing where I was or what was happening to me. I managed to get back to the hotel, plunged my head into a basin of cold water to clear my wits, and began to wonder, why had he sent me from London to Birmingham to see his own self? Why had he written that idiotic letter? No matter how I racked my brains, I could find no answer. Then a thought struck me. I would go to Sherlock Holmes. Only he could fathom the meaning of this. That same evening, I took the train to London to see Mr. Holmes this morning and bring him back to Birmingham. The clerk finished the tale of his extraordinary adventure. A silence followed. Sherlock Holmes gave me a significant look and leaned back against the cushions. The expression on his face was one of satisfaction, yet critical, like that of a connoisseur who has just tasted a sip of vintage wine. "Well, Watson, what do you think of that for a clever scheme?" Holmes remarked. "There is something quite enticing about it. I trust you agree that an interview with Harry Arthur Pinner in the temporary office of the Franklin Midland Hardware Company would be of no small interest to us." "Yes, but how is it to be managed?" I asked. "Quite simply," Hall Pycroft broke in. "You are both friends of mine, seeking employment, and it is only natural that I should recommend you to my master." "Excellent. That is exactly what we shall do," cried Holmes. "I wish to see this gentleman and, if possible, discover what game he is playing. What was it that he saw in you? Why did he give you such a large advance? Could it be—" He began to gnaw his nails, staring out the window with a vacant look, and until we reached New Street, we could not draw another word from him. At 7 o'clock that evening, the three of us were walking down Corporation Street, heading toward the office of the Franklin Midland Company. "There is no need to arrive early," the clerk remarked. "He seems to be there only for the purpose of seeing me. Therefore, there will be no one in the office until the appointed hour." "That is interesting," said Holmes. "There, what did I tell you?" cried Pycroft. "There he is, walking ahead of us." He pointed to a short, fair-haired, well-dressed man hurrying along the other side of the street. As we watched him, Pinner noticed a newsboy opposite, waving the latest editions of the evening paper. He dashed across the street, dodging carriages and omnibuses, and bought a copy. Then, with the paper in his hand, he disappeared into the doorway of the passage. "He is in the office already," cried Pycroft. "Come with me, and I shall introduce you." Following our companion, we climbed to the 5th floor and found ourselves before an unlocked door. Pycroft knocked. A voice from within called out, "Come in." We entered a bare, almost unfurnished room, the appearance of which exactly matched Pycroft's description. At the only table, with the unfolded newspaper in his hand, sat the man we had just seen in the street. He raised his head, and I saw a face distorted by such agony, or rather, not mere agony, but a hopeless despair, such as one sees when a man is struck by an irreparable disaster. His forehead glistened with perspiration, and his cheeks had taken on a deathly, pale tint, resembling the belly of a gutted fish. His glazed eyes were those of a madman. He stared at his clerk as if seeing him for the first time, and from Pycroft's expression I realized that he, too, was seeing his master in this state for the first time. "Mr. Pinner, what is the matter? Are you ill?" he cried. "Yes, I am not feeling quite myself," Mr. Pinner managed to say. "Who are these gentlemen who have come with you?" He added, licking his parched lips. "This is Mr. Harris from Bermondsey, and this is Mr. Price. He is a local resident," our clerk answered volubly. "They're friends of mine, well versed in office work, but both are currently without a post. I thought perhaps you might have an opening for them." "Certainly, why not?" cried Pinner, forcing a smile. "I'm sure we shall find something. What is your line, Mr. Harris?" "I am an accountant," Holmes replied. "Quite so. We have need of accountants." "In your own profession, Mr. Price?" "I'm a clerk," I answered. "I dare say there will be an opening for you as well. As soon as we have reached a decision, I shall let you know at once. But for now, I must ask you to leave. For God's sake, leave me alone." The last words burst from him against his will, as if he no longer had the strength to contain himself. Holmes and I exchanged a glance, and Pycroft stepped toward the table. "Mr. Pinner, you have perhaps forgotten that I came here for further instructions," he said. Yes, of course, Mr. Pycroft," the master of the office replied in a tone that was suddenly expressionless. "Wait for me here a moment, and let your friends wait as well. I shall be at your service in 5 minutes, if you will allow me to trespass upon your patience to that extent." He rose, bowed politely, stepped into the adjoining room, and closed the door behind him. "What is it?" Holmes whispered. "He won't slip away from us, will he?" "No," Pycroft replied confidently. "That door leads only into a second room." "And is there no other exit from it?" "None." "Is it empty as well?" "At least, it was empty yesterday." "Why is he gone in there?" "I cannot quite make it out. It seems as if Pinner has suddenly lost his wits. Something has frightened him nearly out of his senses." "But what?" "Perhaps he thinks we are from the police," I suggested. "Possibly," Pycroft agreed. Holmes shook his head. "No, he was as pale as death when we first entered," he objected. "Unless—" His words were cut short by a sharp thudding sound from the inner room. "What the deuce is he knocking at his own door for?" cried Pycroft. The knocking did not cease. We all stared in expectation at the closed door. Holmes's face grew hard. In his excitement, he leaned far forward. Then, from behind the partition, there came a low, gurgling sound, as if someone were gargling, followed by a frantic drumming against the wooden panels. Holmes, like a madman, sprang across the room and threw himself against the door. It was locked. Pycroft and I rushed to help him, and the three of us threw our weight against the wood. One hinge snapped, then the second, and the door, crashed down upon the floor. We burst inside. The room was empty. Our bewilderment lasted but a moment. In a corner of the room was another door. Holmes dashed to it and flung it open. Behind it, on the floor, lay a coat and waistcoat, and there, hanging from a hook by his own braces, which were drawn tight around his neck, was the manager of the Franca Midland Hardware Company. His knees were tucked up, his head hung unnaturally upon his breast, and his heels, striking against the door, produced that strange thudding which had so alarmed us. In an instant, I had clasped my arms around his limp body and lifted him up, while Holmes and Pycroft untied the elastic noose, which had almost disappeared amidst the livid, purplish folds of skin. We carried Pinner into the other room and laid him on the floor. His face was a leaden gray, but he was still alive. His purple-blue lips puffed in and out with every struggling breath. He was a wretched shadow of the healthy, florid man we had seen in the street but half an hour before. "How is he, Watson?" Holmes asked. I knelt over the prostrate body and began my examination. The pulse was still weak, but the breathing was gradually becoming more regular. His eyelids quivered slightly, revealing a thin white line of the eyeballs. He nearly went to his forefathers, I remarked, but I believe he will pull through. Open the window and bring me that carafe of water. I unbuttoned his shirt, moistened his face with cold water, and began to raise and lower his arms to perform artificial respiration, until at last he took a deep, full breath. "The rest is merely a matter of time," I said, stepping back. Holmes stood by the table, his hands in his trousers pockets, and his head sunk upon his breast. "Well," said he, "it is time to call the police. I must confess, it will give me some pleasure to enlighten them on the details of this case." "I still understand nothing at all," Pycroft admitted, scratching his head. "Hang it all. Why? I ask you as I need it here." "It is all very simple," Holmes said with a wave of his hand. "The only thing that remains obscure to me is the final scene." He gestured toward the braces. "And all the rest is clear to you?" "I believe so. And you, Watson, what do you say?" I shrugged my shoulders. "I understand absolutely nothing," I admitted. "And yet, if you follow the chain of events closely, the conclusion is self-evident," said Holmes. "And what is that conclusion?" "One moment. Let us first return to two starting points. The first is Pycroft's formal application to join this ridiculous company. I trust you can guess why he was forced to write that application. I fear I cannot. And yet, it was needed for a reason. As a rule, a verbal agreement is quite sufficient to engage a man for service, and on this occasion, there was no reason to make an exception. The conclusion is clear. They desperately needed a sample of your handwriting. But why? Why indeed? By answering that, we solve the whole puzzle. Why would they need your handwriting? Simply because someone needed to write something while forged in your hand. Now for the second point. As you shall see, one complements the other. Remember how Mr. Pycroft was sworn not to send a written resignation to Mawson's? It follows that the manager of that bank remains under the impression, to this very day, that the man who reported for duty on Monday was none other than Mr. Hall Pycroft himself. "Good heavens!" cried poor Pycroft. "What an idiot I have been! Now you will fully understand why they needed your script. Imagine a man gaining entrance to Mawson's under your name, yet knowing nothing of your handwriting. He would be caught at once, and his game would be up before it had even begun. If the rogue is familiar with your hand, he has nothing to fear, for, as I understand it, no one at Mawson's had ever seen you in the flesh." "That is the point. No one," groaned Pycroft. "Excellent. Furthermore, It was vital to the swindlers that you should not change your mind, nor accidentally discover that a double was working at Mawson's in your place. Therefore, they gave you a handsome advance and whisked you off to Birmingham, setting you a task that would keep you away from London for at least a week. It is all very simple, as you can see. Yes, but why did he find it necessary to pose as his own brother? That too is clear. There are evidently two of them. One was to take your place at Mawson's. The other was to send you to Birmingham. They did not wish to involve a third person as the company manager. Therefore, the second man altered his appearance as best he could and passed himself off as his own brother, so that even a striking resemblance would not arouse suspicion. And had it not been for that gold filling, it would never have crossed your mind that your London visitor and the Birmingham manager were the same person. Hall Pycroft shook his clenched fists. "My God," he cried, "and what has my double been doing at Mawson's while I have been allowing myself to be led by the nose? What are we to do now, Mr. Holmes?" "What?" "First, telegraph Mawson's without delay. Today is Saturday. The bank closes at 12. That does not matter. There is bound to be a watchman or a porter. Yes, they keep a special night watchman. It was mentioned in the city. They have great values stored in their vaults." "Splendid. We shall ring them up and discover if all is well, and if a clerk of your name is working there. In short, the case is clear. One thing only remains obscure. Why, upon seeing us, did one of the rogues immediately go into the next room and hang himself?" "The paper," came a hoarse voice from behind us. The would-be suicide was sitting on the floor, ghastly and pale. A glimmer of consciousness had returned to his eyes, and his hands nervously rubbed the broad, red mark left by the noose around his neck. "The paper! Of course!" Holmes cried excitedly. "What an idiot I have been! I was so intent on connecting the suicide with our visit that I completely forgot the newspaper. The solution is undoubtedly there." He spread the paper out on the table, and a cry of triumph escaped his lips. "Look at this, Watson!" he cried. "It is the London Evening Standard. Look at these headlines. Great robbery in the city. Murder at Mawson's Bank. Gigantic attempt at robbery. The culprit captured. Here, Watson, read it. I am simply burning with impatience. This failed robbery, judging by the space the newspaper devoted to it, was the main event of the day. This is what I read. A daring attempt at bank robbery was committed in the city this afternoon. One man has been killed, and the criminal is in custody. A few days ago, the well-known banking firm of Mawson and Williams received for safekeeping securities exceeding £1 million in value. The manager, conscious of a responsibility placed upon his shoulders and realizing the danger of storing such a vast sum, established a 24-hour armed guard. The valuables were placed in safes of the very latest design. During this time, a new clerk named Hall Pycroft was taken into the service of the bank. He has turned out to be none other than the notorious housebreaker and cracksman, Beddington, who, along with his brother, was recently released after serving 5 years of penal servitude. By some means yet to be determined, this Beddington managed to secure the clerkship. Having worked for several days, he studied the layout of the vaults and safes and took impressions of the necessary keys. Usually, on Saturdays, the staff at Mawson's leave the bank at exactly 12 o'clock. That is why Sergeant Tuzin, on duty in the city, was somewhat surprised to see a gentleman with a carpet bag in his hand emerging from the bank at 12 minutes past 1. Suspecting something was wrong, he followed the stranger and, after a desperate resistance, apprehended him with the help of Constable Pollock. It was immediately clear that a daring and massive robbery had been committed. The bag was found to be stuffed with securities, American Railway bonds, and shares in other companies. The value of the papers exceeded £100,000. Upon examining the building, the body of the unfortunate watchman was discovered, thrust into one of the largest safes, where it would have remained until Monday, but for the promptness and resourcefulness of Sergeant Tuzin. The poor man's skull had been shattered by a blow from a poker delivered from behind. Evidently, Beddington had returned to the office pretending he had forgotten something. Having murdered the guard and rapidly cleared the largest safe, he attempted to escape with his booty. His brother, who usually works with him, was not, as far as is known, involved in this particular affair. However, the police are taking energetic measures to determine his whereabouts. "We can, perhaps, save the police a good deal of trouble," said Holmes, glancing at the slumped figure cowering by the window. "Human nature is a strange thing, Watson. This man loves his brother, a murderer and a villain, so much that he was ready to lay hands on himself when he learned the gallows awaited him. But there is nothing more to be done. The doctor and I will remain here, while you, Mr. Pycroft, will be so good as to fetch the police."